20th Century Studios released a 249-second clip on its YouTube channel that offers evidence of actors honing their skills for performance capture performances, and that the technology merely supplements their work. James Cameron, the director and writer, says they are interested in the totality of the performance. It is still the actor that creates the moment and the emotion. Join us as we explore how acting is still central to Avatar 2, and why James Cameron decided to cut certain scenes. Stay with us. First up, why it's about acting performances. In this YouTube clip, there is a slew of split-screen scenes. In them, the actor performs while covered in motion capture equipment. This includes facial dots, which will serve as animation and rendering guides. At around the 30-second mark of the clip, Sam Worthington says everything that Jake Sully does as Na'vi, he has done. Sure, the clip is an entertaining and educational glimpse behind the scenes, and into the making of the incredible blockbuster. But it also shows off the moments of high emotion and physical strain that find their roots in old-school acting. And it's worth remembering that when you see the before and after comparisons, these featurettes aim to remind fans that it's still the actors that make the difference. Their performances are still the most important building blocks of the film. John Landau, the producer, briefly explains that since Pandora is fictional and the 9-foot-tall Na'vi 2, the volume technology and performance capture allows the on-set performances and physical efforts of actors to be replicated in a digital world. There is a secondary benefit to this clip too. It offers the newer and younger cast members the opportunity to discuss their experience and craft. Audience members know Stephen Lang, Kate Winslet, and Zoe Saldana in human form, but this may well be the first opportunity fans have to see Bailey Bass, Tsiraya, Britton Dalton, Loak, and Jamie Flatters, Netayam, without their in-film appearance. When an Avatar movie is your big breakout role, it's impossible to send a still picture from the film to an agent and say, "There, that is me." At the end of the clip, Cameron says that he's most focused on the actors when he's on set. That's all he worries about, he says. The camera doesn't distract him, nor does the background and extras. He's 100% there for the star performers. He adds that it is the only way to make a film like Avatar. Gun violence disturbs James Cameron greatly. It is something he really takes to heart. Stay with us. We're going to find out more about that in a moment. Now, why did Cameron cut certain action scenes from Avatar: The Way of Water? The film is set more than a decade after the human colonization of Pandora was repelled. That's in the original Avatar, of course. In the sequel, Neytiri and Jake have to stave off another invasion by RDA. It is led by Quaritch, who has a vendetta against the patriarch of the Sully family. This time around, Neytiri and Jake have help from their Na'vi family, and also the water-based Metkayina clan. There are more than enough thrilling action sequences with Cameron at the helm. From the climactic denouement inspired by Titanic to Spider's kidnapping. When he spoke to Esquire Middle East, Cameron gave the reason why he left some of the action sequences out of the final Avatar cut. And no, it has nothing to do with the hotly debated runtime of the film, 3 hours. Cameron says he cut a total of around 10 minutes of these scenes from the movie. They landed on the cutting floor because they depicted gun violence, and Cameron doesn't want to fetishize this. He says he is super aware of the rampant incidence of US gun violence and didn't want the film associated with that at all. He added that he wanted to get rid of some of the ugliness and, in a way, find a balance between dark and light. Of course, there has to be conflict. No story could survive without it. The fact that the action and violence are essentially the same thing, the dilemma every action filmmaker faces is how to find that balance. And Cameron says he sees himself as an action filmmaker. He also reminisced about some of the films he had made in the past and said he's not sure he would make those films again. What is happening with guns and gun violence in today's society turns his stomach, he says. He's living in New Zealand now, and the government recently banned all assault rifles. This was after the horrifying mosque shooting some years ago. Also, Cameron takes gun violence more seriously than many other directors. Cameron has never shied away from violence in his movies. Think Aliens, Terminator, Terminator 2, and True Lies, for instance. There was also a fair share of gunplay in the original Avatar. Both the Na'vi and RDA used military-grade weapons in their conflict, but because of the continuing gun violence in the USA, Cameron sees it as a responsibility to not fetishize firearms in his films. This is even more important for the Avatar sequels. They're huge 20th Century Studios blockbusters, and as a Disney subsidiary, they're about family and targeted toward families. By cutting those 10 minutes of action scenes that had gun violence, Cameron also inadvertently reduced Avatar: The Way of Water's runtime. It is now exactly 3 hours and 12 minutes long, as opposed to the 3.5 hours of the original cut. Cameron has made the most expensive movie in history a couple of times, and he's done it yet again. For more on that, stay with us. It's coming up in a moment. Now, is it even possible for Avatar 2 to earn enough box office revenue to be profitable. Both of Cameron's most recent releases turned out to be the highest-grossing movie of all time, but the humongous Avatar 2 budget will make the film's ability to turn a profit decidedly more complicated. Sure, it is the sequel to the highest-grossing film of all time, but it is now 13 years after the fact, and we also live in a post-COVID box office world. Cameron says Avatar: The Way of Water will have to break all kinds of box office records just to break even. It probably makes sense that the studio would give the sequel to the highest-grossing movie of all time an increased budget. But is it possible Disney and Cameron overcommitted with Avatar 2? The upside is that Cameron has always had a magic wand when it comes to box office takings, and he says the movie's huge budget may not even be as extreme as it appears. The question of whether Avatar: The Way of Water can match the previous film's box office success is still a hotly debated topic. It's arriving a decade and a half later, and the 3D technology that made the first Avatar so spectacular isn't all that novel anymore. Also, most other performers at the box office seem to be based on popular intellectual properties. Think Star Wars, Marvel, and Jurassic Park, for instance. Avatar 2 is a sequel that hasn't had nearly the brand momentum as other popular and ongoing franchises. These concerns are all understandable, but there is a cultural discourse about whether Avatar is actually relevant, and that question, we believe, probably answers itself. Avatar may not have had any shows or movies released since the original, but brand elements like the Na'vi are probably more recognizable for some general audiences than any of the IP DC and Marvel are currently adapting, including Captain Marvel and Black Adam. What is it that made Avatar: The Way of Water so expensive? We're gonna find out shortly. Watch until the end of the video. Meanwhile, Cameron keeps his reputation for making expensive movies. Cameron has set the record for the most expensive movie of all time more than once. He did it with Terminator 2: Judgment Day back in 1991. He then broke his own record with 1994's True Lies, which was the first film with a budget exceeding $100 million. Then Cameron did it again in 1998 with Titanic, which was the first movie to cost over $200 million. Nowadays, it isn't unusual for a Hollywood blockbuster budget to travel way north of $200 million, and Cameron is countering by raising the bar yet again. Avatar: The Way of Water came in with a budget of between $350 million and $400 million. With the price tag, and once you factor in the theater profit shares and marketing, Avatar 2 will have to do something astronomical at the box office to make any kind of profit. Cameron called it the worst business case in the history of movies, but he is quick to add that this movie won't have to make as much as the first one. Break even will be somewhere in the range of the third or fourth highest grossing film in history, so that is his threshold. Finally, why is the film so expensive? Part of the reason is because of the sheer volume of new technology that had to be developed from scratch to make this movie a reality. 3D technology was revolutionized in the first film. Now, Cameron's ambition is to develop VFX even further, and he stresses that this was necessary for the film to turn out the way he wanted it. It is especially true for all the water elements. He also says the price tag is high, but Avatar 2's profitability isn't as black and white as it seems. Remember, Disney greenlit the project with 4 sequels with a total budget of $1 billion. So the gap between Avatar and Avatar 2, Avatar 3, which is called Avatar: The Seed Bearer, is already in production. The overhead cost of that film will be markedly less because most of the expensive new technology will be absorbed by Avatar 2. So Avatar: The Seed Bearer won't struggle as much to be profitable. All that probably doesn't matter all that much. The fact is, the films will still need to be right in the crowd of highest grossing movies ever before they will turn a profit, but we should try not to get over dramatic. Another way to look at it is if Titanic's $200 million budget in 1998 is adjusted for 2022, it would have cost around $370 million. There is something Cameron has proven time and time again in his career: his ability to work with budgets and the box office. His teeth were cut on low-budget productions at Roger Corman Studios, and he designed the Terminator for an infinitesimal $6.4 million budget. It ended up earning around $80 million at the box office. He knows how to push budgets and make a profit. And that is how we end this video, folks. Thanks for staying with us. Remember to hit like, follow, and subscribe on your way out. And look out for our next contribution.